Today we're with Brad from Recorded Future. Brad, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Cool. So before we get started, can you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so again, my name is Brad Mecha. I'm Director of Managed Services here at Recorded Future. So I run a team of global threat response analysts that support Recorded Future clients in a wide variety of capacities, whether it's brand monitoring, acting on the behalf of our clients as their threat intelligence provider. We do third-party risk monitoring and vulnerability prioritization.
Is this how long has the company been around?
We've been around for over a decade. We get a lot of questions. What's up with the name Recorded Future? So the primary technology itself, when it was built 10 years ago, it's a data collection and analysis platform. And one of the cool data science tricks that we did was we would pull out events. Like, let's say somebody said on Twitter, hey, in a month, I'm going to DDoS Netflix. So you could use that system to then say, hey, what are things that are going to happen in the future? And then pull out and try to predict things that are happening. So that's where the name Recorded Future came from. So like today, if you run a search in the platform and say, hey, show me things that are going to happen like six weeks from now, you can see people say stuff like, hey, in a month, we're going to do this, or I bet you in 60 days, this thing's going to happen. So you can start seeing how people are talking about things that are going to happen in the future.
Great. I think threat intelligence is kind of it's kind of one of those things almost like cloud, though. You get hit from a bunch of different angles. Some platforms, say they have it built in.
Yeah.
So what about those types of solutions versus what you guys have to offer, and how would you enhance those solutions, or how do you play into the firewalls and all those other things?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's based on at the end of the day, it's based on the maturity levels of our clients, right? Like if you look at some of the largest clients of Recorded Future, we're talking about service providers, the largest media organizations, the largest healthcare providers. They have teams of people that are working on the behalf of multiple clients within their organizations. And when I mean clients, I mean you have the CISO coming to them saying, hey, we're planning on opening a new business unit in China. Like, what are the geopolitical ramifications of us doing business in China? All the way to a gaming company that says, we have new gaming cards that are coming out, and we want to know when people may have stolen those or talked about them before they're released, or new products that are being released. So threat intelligence is being used in a wide variety of mechanisms, and that data then shows up in a lot of different places as well.
Now, one of particular interest to me is the part you mentioned about vulnerability management component and adding intelligence to that.
Yeah.
We have an application we call our attack surface management application. So this is particularly of interest to me because it ties in with something we're trying to do. So can you tell me how that all works?
Yeah, so attack surface management is a newer technology and program that has definitely been we've been seeing more discussions around it as well. So the concept is, if you look at like a traditional vulnerability management program, you go out and you buy a vulnerability scanner, you do a bunch of authenticated scans, and it tells you all my assets and what vulnerabilities are associated with them or misconfigurations. Attack surface management is starting to look from the outside perspective of just basic questions like, what do I own? What's connected to the internet? What's my exposure associated with these assets? So like a good example is, we talked about ransomware yesterday. Pulse Secure VPN server is one of the top services, applications that's being used by ransomware operators today. So as a defender or a CISO or a CIO, the next question is going to be, do we have Pulse Secure VPN server in our environment? And is it connected to the internet? And what versions do we have? And are those versions being used by ransomware operators? So it's being able to ask those questions and then get answers back in minutes or seconds rather than, hey, go track down the network team and like see what's connected to the network and, you know, does it have a public IP address? Like all those questions will be answered in the matter of minutes, and then you can better defend yourself knowing that information.
Great. So if I'm an organization and I'm trying to mature my model, I mean, how can I, and everybody's got to, automate what they can because there's just so much going on nowadays that,
Yeah.
So how do I use this to make my systems, get more intelligence so I can do other things in my program more effectively, like identifying the real risk and threats?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I think, first off, there's obviously going to be pain in manual data entry today. So, at Recorded Future, where I run our managed services team, one of the things that I look at is like, what is the repeatable work that we're just moving data from point A to point B? So if you have a SIM and you're looking to do detection or enrichment of, hey, I got this IDS alert, like what does everybody else know about it? Rather than having to pivot to another system and look that up and do that analysis, why not just put that system or put that data right into the SIM right alongside that IDS alert? So just removing 5 steps of data entry will save people a lot of time. And once you do that, then you can start doing security orchestration, automation, and doing better incident detection. And there's some downstream things you can do there. Outside of that, I'd say just offloading some of the threat intelligence work to an intelligence service provider helps as well. So when your CISO comes to you and it's like, hey, what are we doing around ransomware? Or what's the ransomware landscape look like? Rather than have somebody sit down and try to figure out how to write that report, just go to your intelligence provider and be like, hey, I need a ransomware threat landscape report, and it's going to go to my executive team, and there's a possibility that it might go to my board of directors. So write it for them. Like write it for your intended audience, so you can offsource.
So you help with the role-based, basically reporting.
Yeah,
so
yeah,
depending
absolutely.
upon whether it's going to the real technical guys.
Yeah, and we have our analyst team have presented to board of directors because not everybody understands how to communicate effectively to different parts of the organization. So that goes a long way.
Yep, that's good. So how does this threat intelligence tie in with some of the things like assume breach posture or threat indicator of compromise hunting? Is there a relationship between those?
Yeah, there definitely is. So I think if you look at it from just a breach detection perspective, I'm going to spin this a little bit more towards something like third-party risks today, where we're now seeing a lot of organizations become more concerned around who are we doing business with and what is their security posture. So have any of our suppliers or third-party vendors been associated in a ransomware attack and they didn't tell us about it? And did our data show up in that? So those are some very awkward conversations our clients are having with their vendors around that. Yeah. So that's part of it. I think the other side of it is just getting a general awareness of what are like when we talk about something like ransomware, what threats should we be concerned with? Are those threats targeting my industry? And if they are, how can we use the lessons learned from those other peers of mine that have got targeted? What can we learn from that to better inform our security posture, and how can we do better detection and defense?
So it really is, they are targeting industries. Once they get familiar with an industry, they stay on that industry as opposed to just randomly looking for who's the most vulnerable out there.
Yeah, we actually were dealing with a law firm that got hit with $1 million business email compromise just last week. And what we learned from that was then able to go to our other law firms that are clients, not all of them, but I would say 10% of them. Somebody stood up infrastructure that looked just like this other attack. The only difference was they're using your logo. So brand monitoring, which, a lot of people will say, well, that's like a marketing thing. There's like real security value into
fake logins and all
fake
that.
logins is all using your brand in the wrong way, in a malicious way. And we see that all the time. So that's threat intel. Is brand monitoring is threat intelligence.
Is there any other key use cases you can share with us? And you're dealing with things that stood out and said, "Wow, that's a paradigm shifter." Or,
Yeah, I think like one area that gets a lot of coverage in our discussions with clients is like dark web monitoring,
Right,
which it's like, oh, let's go look at this like secret secret place where people are, dealing with like stolen passports and drugs. And that's there, right? Like you can go to the dark web today, and if you wanted to buy, an ounce of cocaine, like you could completely do that. However, the utility of it for certain clients is just not there, right? So like if you look at a marketplace where stolen digital assets are being sold, what's being sold is, hey, I popped this machine with Azort malware. It happens, I think it belongs to Netflix. Who wants to buy it? $10.
Okay.
Like that's how
Really?
much it costs. Or a good example, I talked about this yesterday. Audi had a big database breach. This was back in June, but they popped Audi's database. They got a list of every Audi customer. So username, password, their VIN number, and all that. That entire database of Audi users was sold for $5,000. So there's utility to understanding, are any of my users compromised in any way, right? Are there clear text passwords now being exposed? Are those clear text passwords, do they meet password complexity policies? Because now you come full circle, and there's been attacks where like Colonial Pipeline and some of these larger attacks, it was just somebody using previously known usernames and passwords that were bought on dark web marketplaces. So there's very specific use cases where there's benefit there, but just saying, hey, we need to monitor the dark web, like it's got to be more actionable and more specific.
Have you we had a lawyer that we spoke with earlier today, and he mentioned that one of their key, well, not a key use case, but a really unique use case is people offering employees at companies money to help them breach the company. Insider threat type of thing. Have you run into that at all?
We've seen a little bit of it, but it's in usually larger organizations. I just saw in the news today that there was a couple that tried stealing secrets around sonar technology on submarines to an undercover FBI agent. So I think that we're seeing more of that around like intellectual property. Like even 10 years ago when Boeing and some of the defense industrial base were compromised, there were certain nationals from military organizations that went to school here in the States as engineers, got hired at places like Boeing, and then 5 years later were stealing intellectual property and standing up new companies in other countries. So that's a thing. It's a real thing, but is it as pervasive as everyone talks about? That's to be determined.
Does your intelligence help much with the phishing world?
Yeah, so we actually have a third-party brand monitoring solution where when we work with clients that are concerned with phishing attacks, we will notify them when any of their suppliers have new phishing sites stood up. So, hey, you work with A, B, and C. We just saw a phishing site stood up. Let's go block that domain on like a web filtering gateway or in your DNS, let's say in your DNS firewall or at your email gateway. And then we will work with them to get the site taken down within 24 hours. Like we work with domain registrars, and let's get this thing taken down before it can do any harm.
Great. So where do you see the world of all this headed, the threat intelligence world?
I think you're seeing a consolidation where a lot of the like NSA, like really sharp threat intel people are going to vendors. And if you're not going to a vendor, you're going to a very forward thinking private organization like the Facebooks, and they're just Google. They're just collecting all these really sharp people and paying them a lot of money. And with the fair market value of these people going up so much, it's really hard for like local, even within Fortune 500 organizations, to go out and hire these people. They're either too expensive or, with COVID now, this is the problem I had at Rockwell Automation, trying to get somebody from San Diego to move to Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Like that's a problem. So now you got to work with your HR teams on how do we change our hiring practices to get these people to work remote. And now remote introduces a whole slew of new challenges.
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, this has been very informative for me.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing kind of your tribal knowledge here. It's kind of, sometimes people just want to kind of spew the sales pitch here.
Yeah.
So I want to dive a little bit deeper to get a little more clarity, because you mentioned that you run the managed service business.
Yeah.
And when we were talking before we started recording this, that means something very different. So could you provide our audience a little more clarity about the business unit that you operate?
Yeah, so we have a very large subset of Recorded Future users that, for a wide variety of reasons, have outsourced their threat intelligence to my team. So that could be brand monitoring, where maybe there was an executive directive, hey, we need to do brand monitoring, and the team's like, we don't have the skill set, or it's just not something we want to do. So they would outsource that function to us. We have like a very large city that uses us to do all their vendor security monitoring for them. So they have 3,000 vendors. We're looking at those vendors, if they've been breached, or has there been any type of like data compromise, or are they using any of their technologies that have been vulnerable or have been used in a way to further support compromise. We have clients at small credit unions that want to get better prepared around ransomware monitoring. So we tell them, patch this now, and here's how many assets have it. Don't stop patching until it's done. That type of thing. So it's very prescriptive. It's very, very focused on specific end goals.
Very cool. Well, it's interesting. I saw on LinkedIn you mentioned that you started at Rockwell Automation. I think that's some of the grassroots of SynerComm in the old days. I think
Rockwell Automation, FIS, and Metavante. I think we've been in some meetings before.
Right.
So,
yeah.
We go way back. There's a
world.
lot of really good organizations here in Milwaukee.
That's awesome. Well, Brad, I appreciate you coming on today. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, no problem.